camera is rolling. Hi, I'm Jesper. I'm a 20-year-old composer and sound designer for video games and media. And as a part of my course this semester, I have done research on communication with in-game projects, specifically AAA game projects. So a quick disclaimer before I start summing up my findings. Since I have been talking to some pretty big names in the industry with big companies, I will not be mentioning either the person or the company they work for, because that is sensitive information and I don't want that spread around, and I don't want to personally deal with the repercussions of their legal teams. Now that's out of the way, let's start with the first subject. So the first subject is quite easy, is basically the usual communication path. So I made this little chart right here, and I'll just explain through that little thing. So at the top you have the producer, which is the person who funded the project, who is basically keeping tabs on the entire thing so the project is running smoothly. He's in touch with all the supervisors, so you have the engineering supervisor, the design supervisor, stuff like that. He's in touch with them to ensure everything's going well. And he is also in touch with the audio supervisor. The audio supervisor is basically the big boss of audio. They're usually pretty big seniors from either other companies or the same company, and they just have more experience. They know how things are supposed to sound, and they're usually more keen with planning and organizing, so they are assigned a supervising lead. Then below that you have the audio lead, which is usually also either a composer or sound designer working on the project, which is basically like a representative of the audio team. So if you want to go to the audio supervisor or the producer, you would usually first contact your lead as a composer then. And then below that you have the actual talents themselves. So let's say the voice actors, the sound designers, and the composers. So as you might see, there's a lot of different lines running all through the graph. That means there's not one set path. You don't always have to go through either your lead or your supervisor to talk to the producer. You can also talk to them directly in some cases. It really depends on the company you're working with in that certain moment. Now that we kind of have a view of what communication looks like, and after you had a look at the graph, I want to have a look at communication software and means of communication more specifically. Because you have two instances. You have instances where people work remote, where you work away from the office, and you have instances where people work in-house. And in this case, when you work in-house, communication can just go by, oh yeah, I'll talk to you during lunch. Or after work, can we meet up for a cup of tea or something? But if you're working remotely, that is different because, you can't just walk over to another person's office. So then usually you would have a set few of popular communication platforms used by bigger companies, such as Zoom, even though Zoom is only for meetings, Discord, Teams, and Slack. And next to that, if you're working on a smaller project, you may also see a few less popular choices. Let's say WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger, stuff like that. So, of course, when you're working on something with other people, there's bound to be struggles and things that are difficult. They don't have to go wrong, but they can just be tasking, or they can be taxing, take a lot of energy. And I want to talk about those too because those are a pretty important part of the audio business. Since you're communicating so much, you're bound to walk into these struggles at some point. One of those struggles being people. You're working with people, so of course each person has their own preference, or some people prefer this over this, or they might just have their own way of communicating, which sometimes can lead to confusion or maybe things being unclear. As a little example, let's say you're a senior in the company and a junior asks you for feedback, and you give your feedback, but it's not in a way that the junior necessarily appreciates. Well, that can upset the junior, and that is not your point. You just want to give feedback. This could be a thing just because, you've communicated in a way that is to them specifically not very nice or very cool or something they would like to see. And yeah, of course, there's also some struggles with the software being used. One of those struggles often being that in big channels like in Discord and in Slack, you would get a massive pile of information and the communication that just piles up without organization. So let's say there's a really important message here, and then below that there's reactions or people talking about something else, and you lose your information in the massive pile of stuff going on. There are solutions to that, but that can be quite, energy consuming or time consuming because you have to flag everything and sort through it and stuff like that. There's also solutions like, you know, setting up certain notifications, which doesn't have to take a lot of time, but still, it could take 10 minutes, but that's still 10 minutes spent on communication instead of working on a feature or something. One last important thing that I saw being like talked about quite often in communication that is a struggle is the fact that in some cases the producers or designers don't really have a clear vision of what they want sound-wise yet. So you're basically starting on something, you just make a few like rough drafts, you send it over, and then they give you very vague feedback because they don't really know themselves what they want yet. A good way of solving this is like asking them for reference material afterwards, but still it can be quite difficult to try to communicate about a project and just get stuck on the fact that people don't really know what they want yet. So a few like tips that I've gathered through this project might be useful to put at the end of this video is, one of them is definitely to not be scared to over communicate. So if you're in a project working on something and you're scared of communicating too much, there's nothing really wrong with it unless somebody clearly tells you like to talk to them less because it takes too much of their time. But over communicating is actually sometimes a good thing because, you know, there's a good flux of information and people know what's going on and what you're stuck on or whatnot. Another tip is whenever you're working on a project and you're stuck, that is usually very detrimental because you don't want to lose too much time on being stuck. So if you ever get stuck, don't feel ashamed. Just directly reach out to either your lead or your supervisor so you can have a look at what's keeping you stuck, what is preventing you from moving forward, and then trying to solve that as quickly as possible. That is a very important thing. Yeah, and one more thing is that in communication, because you're dealing with people, it's not necessarily always the best thing to be super honest or like brutally honest, if that's a good way to put it. Sure, you can be honest, but an audio supervisor I interviewed literally told me in the interview, in these cases it's not necessarily survival of the fittest, but survival of the nicest. So just be nice to people, be cordial, be a good colleague, help them out when they need help, you know. That could already help out a lot in communication to prevent struggles. So this was basically a short video to just summarize my findings. My goal for this project was basically to inform young or starting sound designers and composers for games of what they can expect when they start on a new project communication wise, so that they have an idea of who to talk to or what kind of things they can do to just, you know, have a smooth start within the company. Yeah, that's basically it. All right, cool. Cheers.